Welcome to the Zero Breach Zone, the ultimate podcast dedicated to safeguarding K-12 schools from cyber threats and beyond.
I'm Andy.
And I'm Phil, your co-host guiding you through the intersection of cybersecurity and education.
Each episode, Phil and I will dive into conversations that matter, breaking down the latest cybersecurity challenges that schools face.
And we're not doing it alone. We'll be bringing some experts in the field from the EdTech world and beyond for interviews, getting their take on the most pressing issues.
Plus, every episode will wrap up with a recurring segment, The Parting Tool, where we'll share a top tip or tool that you can start using immediately to stay ahead of breaches, phishing, and everything in between.
So, welcome to the show. We're thrilled to have you here with us. Let's not just listen, but let's take some action. Connect with us on LinkedIn and other socials and join the conversation. Together, we can build a strong community dedicated to protecting our schools. Welcome back to the Zero Breach Zone podcast. We are here entering spring. I'm actually seeing signs of spring. I'm Phil Hintz. I am the CTO for a wonderful school district in Illinois, and my co-host right next to me.
I'm Andy Lombardo. I'm the Director of Technology at Maryville City Schools in East Tennessee. And we've also had some spring-like weather today, mostly in the form of spring showers. So it'll be sunny for an hour and then downpour for 10 minutes and then sunny for an hour. And it's just been a repeating cycle all day.
All right. Yeah, spring is in the air. I think successfully survived some of our winter extravaganza. So it's crazy. We had a really good opportunity to meet a lot of folks and bring a lot of folks to our listeners through the FETC conference that was at the end of January. And here we are, April already. And we wanted to catch up here. This episode and our next episode is going to be some catching up here with Andy and I. We've done and seen a lot of things. Yeah, what do you want to talk about today?
Yeah, it seems like FETC was about 2 years ago at this point. So it's been an onslaught of just activity after activity. And I think right off the heels of FETC, we both had the luck of going to the K-12-6 National Cybersecurity Leadership Conference in San Diego, which was my first time going. How about you, Phil?
It was the first time for me as well. I was glad we were in the room where it happens thing.
Yes. Yeah, and it's one of those experiences where you just love being with your people. And you could go to any table, talk to anybody, and you're talking to people who sit in similar seats to us, who do similar jobs to us, who have the same constraints and the same hopes and dreams and nightmares. And it's just great to get a collection of people.
And that being said, strategies, hearing other folks, what they're trying to do. And I know one that hit home for me strategy-wise and made me really start to think. We talk a lot about MFA, talk a lot about timeout times. And I heard some districts that actually had too long of a timeout time, and that caused a threat to them from a ransomware attack. It made us start to think, okay, maybe we need, how long is too long and how long is too short maybe? Because we got I know we are going to tighten some things up in our district for that very reason. And so when I say how long, I'm thinking of my HR department. I'm thinking of our HR department came to us and said, hey, can we shorten some of these times? And I said, I'm good with that from a cybersecurity standpoint. I'm absolutely good with that. But how are we going to communicate that to our teachers and our folks? Because that means they're going to have to log on twice as often or way more often. And what have you dealt with on the login times like that?
Yeah, and just on that topic, it's one of the things where a lot of times you have to remember that cybersecurity is a never-ending journey. Like there's not a destination with anything that we do when we're trying to protect schools. And especially MFA was one of those first big pinnacles for a lot of school districts. And it's easy to fall victim to that thinking that we've enabled MFA, we're good. Yeah. But then, like you mentioned, there's so many things to tweak when you're looking at things like session times, when you're looking at phish-resistant MFA. We've got this big push right now to passkeys, to being able to, instead of just having an MFA token, you actually have to have a private key that's bound to your device, which just makes it even harder for adversaries. MFA is awesome. I would much rather have MFA than nothing. There are all kinds of things to tweak and to continue going, and especially as attackers evolve and they find ways around things that we do with MFA. Like I think we've talked before about using Evil Jinx to capture session cookies and be able to bypass MFA that way. Yeah. There's some other tools I've seen recently. There's a tool I saw recently called MFA Sweep, that what it does is it scans your Microsoft 365 environment and it looks for places where you've misconfigured accounts and forgotten to enable MFA for certain roles or certain services. And so you may have enabled MFA, but not for every service. So maybe not for Azure, or maybe not for Microsoft Graph or something else. And so it's helping attackers look for those little weaknesses. So yeah, so it's when we get our people in the same room together, there were tons of things that people brought up that I hadn't thought about or that I wasn't doing yet. And then hopefully there were things that people brought up that I was able to contribute to. But that doesn't happen if we don't get together.
That's absolutely true. I'm just hearing, and there were several people with different roles. So it wasn't just CTOs or CIOs. And we heard a little bit of corporate ideas as well. Going back to the idea of MFA, something that I hadn't thought about was MFA on our social media accounts. From a communication standpoint, if somebody were to hijack some of that, we're definitely making sure that's already in play so that we can make some corrections there. And hopefully that's a tip to somebody who hasn't thought about that or thought, like you said, we MFA on Azure and some of the main core products, but not some of these other sidebar ones, or that we think are sidebar ones.
Right. Yeah, especially social media. If you want to fail very publicly, that's a great way for it to happen.
Yeah, I don't want that to happen. No.
Right.
Andy, I got the good chance to hear you speak and do a presentation to a packed room. I wish I would have thought about it. I would have put the picture. So I took a picture because I could only get in the back of the room. I was almost standing room only. I did find one chair, but I took a picture of everybody in there, and everybody was quiet in there. Which typically from a teacher standpoint, you want an interaction stuff, but it was quiet.
We're a bad audience.
But everybody there was hanging on your every word. And rightfully, you had a lot of good use cases of, I think we talk about failure at times, and you weren't afraid to be vulnerable and show some of the failures and the things you learned from those failures and how you reinforced things based on scenarios and situations that happened in your place. You gave a lot of great tips to everybody on different things, so much so that I want you to present to my team some of the things that I learned from you, because I think it's worth sharing. And I think they may have recorded it, but who knows? If they did, it should hopefully the K-12-6, if you're a member of K-12-6, you might be able to get a hold of that. If not, I'm not really sure how you get a hold of it, but it was some really good stuff. And anybody out there that wants to hire Andy to come in and do a consulting thing, I would highly recommend it.
Thank you, Phil. I appreciate the plug there. It was a great time, a great session. I've done that session a few times now, both for EDU audiences and not EDU audiences. The basic premise, like you mentioned, is basically it's a list of real attacks that we've seen in our environment, both from insiders and students and external attacks. And so it's just going through a list of things that I've seen over the past few years, and then the things that we've put in place to try to shore up defenses where we've seen those deficiencies. And I know coming up, I'm going to do that presentation in, May at the Knoxville B-Sides conference, which will be fun because it's for a entirely non-education audience. I've gone to B-Sides for several years. And if you're not familiar with B-Sides, it's basically, the basic idea is it's just a security conference. It's a 1-day, 2-day event usually, and usually piggybacks off of another conference. And the goal was to make a cheap, affordable, and highly valuable conference for people that couldn't afford to go to some of the higher priced security conferences. And B-Sides events take place all over the country. Knoxville's is in May every year. Looking forward to presenting there for the first time.
So basically a generic K-12-6.
Yes. Yep. And it's people from all industries, which is really fun because we get our K-12 blinders on.
Yep.
And it's fun to get that perspective from outside as well. And it's also fun to share our perspective because a lot of people in industry don't consider the unique constraints and challenges that we face.
True. Very true. Yeah. The other thing in your presentation, you actually did a full demo of and showed us a real-time one of the tools that you had used. Maybe you want to talk about that a little bit, but then we can go into one of the real-time things that we did on the Monday at K-12-6, which was the scenario-based tabletops. We can talk about that after, but the tool that you were showing us when you were going real-time, what was that tool?
Yeah, so it's Evil Jinx, and that's what I referred to a minute ago talking about doing MFA bypass attacks. And basically what Evil Jinx does is it does a man-in-the-middle attack or adversary in the middle where, like a traditional phishing email, you would send out a malicious link that you've crafted using Evil Jinx. And what the link will do is it will pull your organization's sign-in page, but keep its malicious URL. And so you see your sign-in page and you're putting in your credentials, and it'll do the MFA prompt. It'll do everything because it's going to Microsoft. It's just going through a site that's in control of the attacker. And so when you complete your MFA authentication, you put in your code, the attacker gets the session cookie that's created for you for your session. And so wrapping back around to what you talked about at the beginning about doing like session length, one of the things that we talked about a lot at the conference about overlooking is you've had a compromised account and you've disabled the account, you've reset the password, re-enabled the account. There are a lot of things that are in play there still for the attacker to have persistence. And so in our scenario, if our user visits a link that's Evil Jinx or something similar, captures a session cookie, and we detect that the account's been compromised and we just reset the password, that attacker still has control of the account because they still have that session cookie. So until that session times out, they are in control unless you intentionally revoke sessions. And if you don't do that as part of your normal triage, you have a compromised account, revoking sessions should definitely be one of those steps in the process.
So if you had a 30-day window for that session, the attacker basically would have 30 days to play around.
Yeah, so you reset that password on day one, but then they still have 29 more days of access before they get kicked out. Just being aware that those kinds of attacks exist is really the first step. It's like G.I. Joe, knowing is half the battle, knowing the things you're defending against. And so it's really simple. Once they have that cookie, there are Chrome and Edge extensions where you can basically just go and plug in a cookie and you have access as that person, as that identity. And it doesn't trigger as a sign in your Microsoft logs. Yeah. So bonus of double stealthy on the attacker's part.
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
That you mentioned about the tabletop exercise. That's one of the areas where for a long time, I was very hesitant to do a tabletop because I didn't feel like I was ready to do a tabletop, or I didn't feel like my team was ready to do a tabletop, or that my stakeholders weren't ready. And so if you're in that boat where you've been reticent about performing one, what we did at K-12-6 was just a perfect example of how you don't have to be an expert, you don't have to be ready. It's really just getting people in the room and talking about what would you do if something goes wrong.
Yeah. And that's one of the things I liked about it was ran by CISA, which CISA, for those that might be joining us for the first time, CISA meetings is the acronym for?
Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, I believe.
Yes, you got it. And they ran us through pretty much a half day almost but 3 different scenarios, and they've got really good questions. They laid out the scenario for 30 days, like day 1 or day 0, right? You start with day 0 and then you go in, the first day of the attack. You may not know that you're being attacked, but it's already happened, but you might have little clues here and there. And as those clues start to add up and you're like, oh, what's going on here? But by the time you get to day 30, you definitely know that you've been attacked, and they've taken advantage of your stuff. And so that was really neat so how do you communicate that out there? What's the communication? Who's in charge of what and when? You want to talk about
and especially because it's not an IT department problem. Yeah. Doing a tabletop that's really expanded includes your HR department, your finance department, your communications department, your leadership. Getting those people in the same room and say, okay, this happened. Like with the scenario on day 1, we've detected this has happened. At what point do we make parent notifications? At what point do we call in cyber insurance? At what point do we, if there's a safety issue, if there's been a ransomware attack and all of your systems are locked and you have no internet and no phones, do you call out school? Who makes that decision? What's the threshold? And those are things that in the fog of war are really hard to kind of walk through the ramifications of. But if you've sat down in advance and talked through and said, okay, this kind of scenario happens, this is what we're considering. So it gives you that kind of frame of reference for your pre-planning for an event.
Yeah, definitely. And that was one thing that I found also is that they emphasized the idea. So many times we think about, we practice, or we have been ever since Columbine and some of the early attacks at school, from the physical security side of things, and districts, it's almost maybe mandated in some states that you go through a safety exercise or a tabletop exercise that's similar to be prepared. Not any different than when I was growing up and it was tornado drills and this drill and that drill. This is a little bit more advanced of a drill, if you will. And unfortunately, in the modern day, we have to be prepared. And the thing that was emphasized a lot at K-12-6 was the idea of the convergence of physical security and cybersecurity, and how a lot of times It's very similar actions, but we think of them as two separate events. And sometimes it can happen simultaneously. Sometimes it can't, but some of the actions and the key players still just need to be just as prepared, whether it is a physical security attack or a cybersecurity attack. And a lot of times it's the same people that are in charge as far as communication goes, as far as the spokesperson. Yeah, but that was neat to see the convergence. That was the word that they actually used, was convergence of physical and cyber.
Yeah, I'm living right in the middle of that convergence right now because we're in the middle of an access control project, which was going to tie into identity and access management, both with our Microsoft environment, but also physical access management with doors, with all of the cyber kind of check boxes come into play. Are you instituting least privilege? Do people have access to only the doors they need?
Right.
All kinds of things where it's two worlds hitting together. And so it's a lot of meetings between me and facilities and our student safety coordinator. Back to that theme of getting a bunch of stakeholders in the room, because it's not just an IT problem.
It's funny. I don't know. Maybe we did talk about this, but I'm doing the same thing in our district right now. We just got our bids back from an RFP for physical security. And that is, and of course, coming back from K-12-6, I was able to sit down with our folks, our team, the stakeholders, like you mentioned, and say, hey, all of this starts to really converge, and there's a lot of things we can put into play that will help us in so many different ways, but simultaneously, whether it be classroom sound systems that you can put in. One of the questions when I mentioned classroom sound systems, it's not just the voice amplification for the teachers, but a lot of times that will also have a panic button on it that can alert the front office that something's going on. If you tie that to a camera, then the front office can actually, hey, if they hear from teacher A that there's a fight breaking out in the hallway in front of classroom 202, a lot of times they can hit a button and and activate the camera to see what's going on right in front of room 202, so they know how big it is, and then maybe who the closest security personnel might be available to help with it. Really,
and those things just keep snowballing because we're on the same path here. We're doing the same things, and we're also in the process right now of integrating with our local 911 emergency dispatch center and taking the tour of there where they can push the buttons and pull up our cameras. And if someone pushes the panic button, they get an alert that identifies which camera to pull up. And it's so interconnected. It's wild. 15 years ago, I couldn't imagine what's going on now.
I got to ask you then, because this is something we were wrestling with, is electronic door locks on classrooms. Are you going that route?
Not yet.
Yeah.
So we're in the phase before that. So that's the eventual. So phase one will be about exterior door security. And then we're going to move to refine that a little bit, especially with door propping. I don't know if you have door propping issues where you're at, but we have some schools that have a door in every classroom that goes to the outside.
Oh.
And it's really easy for them to be like, oh, we're just going to go out to recess, or we're going to have fresh air today, or we're going to whatever. And then prop a door with a rock and it stays open. So we're putting in some places and putting in some detection there to be able to be notified when someone props the door. And then after that, we're looking at interior doors. So probably 5 or 6 year plan to get all of those accomplished.
Yeah. Speaking of CISA, when we had in February, we had here in Illinois, we had the Secure Ed event that Illinois puts on, or our LTC, our Learning Technology Centers, put it on here in Illinois. And it was a really good event. I think you and I did a session as well during that one. It was a virtual event. But one of the things they taught, that this keynoter was our Illinois region's CISA agent and his team. And he had talked about that the organization, if we ask them to, will come out and actually do not just tabletop exercises, which they could very well do from a cybersecurity standpoint, but they'll also come out and do a physical security audit. And they'll look around. And I'm sure we're going to take them up on that, because I just want to know, because first of all, it's free, and why not? Because they're going to be looking at things that we maybe hadn't even thought of to look for. But I think one of the things they're going to look for is they're going to see, are there doors that are propped open just because it was easier for the custodian to get out to the trash can or whatever. They're going to be looking for things like that. I'm expecting them to tick off different things like that. It's just interesting that CISA is willing to do that, because they also see, again, the convergence of physical and cyber.
And especially with all the uncertainty in federal funding and everything, although everyone takes advantage of as many CISA services as they can while they can.
Yeah.
And great things that they offer. And like you said, it's free. So why not?
Right.
And it's always great to have that outside third party perspective because we get so close to what we're doing that it's hard to see the big picture sometimes. And it's great to be able to tag someone in. I would love, Phil, for you to come down to my district and just walk the halls for a day and look at things and look at how we do things. And there's so much value in that. I can't speak enough about finding opportunities to get with your peers and evaluate your practices, what you're doing.
Sure.
It's the most valuable PD I've had.
That's a great idea. We definitely need to do that. Maybe we even broadcast live as we're walking the halls or something. I don't know. Just walking and talking. Maybe that's something we could do. Speaking of that, so K-12-6, phenomenal couple of days there in San Diego. Highly recommended if you can take advantage of it next year. Is it going to be in San Diego next year? Where did they say that was going to be next year? I'm trying to remember.
I've not seen an announcement yet. It could be out, but I've not seen it.
Okay. So be on the lookout for next, I believe that was in March. Look out for at that point in time. So right after that, leading into March, later end of March was the CoSN, the Consortium of School Networkers National Conference. Their theme this year was Human Leadership in the World of AI. Of course, AI makes it easier, provides for a lot of efficiencies for us as teachers and administrators. Also, as we've been saying for a couple of months here now, it provides for a lot of efficiencies for our attackers out there as well. It's a really good tool for them too. So it's really important to understand all the different avenues that AI can provide, good and bad, but also the aspect of maintaining humanity in it. And so that was the theme. It was held in Seattle. And in fact, a good friend of mine, and I really enjoy listening to him whenever I can, Ken Shelton, did the keynote of the opening keynote, I should say, because they had several keynotes at CoSN. But his theme of is reimagining learning with AI, a path to empowerment, was what he talked about. And it was a moderated session, but it was really good. A lot of good tips on what to look for and how to think about integrating AI in a K-12 environment, but also from a networking standpoint, from an operations standpoint, which sometimes we don't think about that. We're more in schools, we're thinking more education side of it. But this was a little bit of both and some frameworks to wrap your head around how to mitigate hallucinations and bias that AI can many times produce. It's getting better every day, but it's still there. That was one of the main sessions that was there. I had the good fortune I am a mentor. I think I've mentioned before when we talked to Cheryl Abshire in the past and Frankie Jackson in the past. I'm a mentor for the Early CTO Academy, and we got to meet a lot of the folks because that's a national cohort that's been going on all year, and really good to come face to face with a lot of the students and mentors and mentees together. And so we had a whole day together, and that was like almost a pre-conference to CoSN. But to hear part of that project was they have a capstone project. It would be some sort of project that they are working on from a tech standpoint, from a tech leadership standpoint. And they all had a chance to present what they were doing, and it was a wide variety of topics. Really neat to hear that's the great thing about these conferences is whether I'm getting it from somebody who's brand new in the field or somebody who's been doing it for 30 years, I'm always walking away with several, not just one, but several nuggets of good wisdom and information and opportunities and best practices. Hopefully I'm convincing you, Andy, to come to CoSN next year. I wish you would have been there this time around, but I know you got to be in your role at different times, and I get it. But the good fortune is CoSN's going to be in Chicago next year. We're hosting it here in my neck of the woods, right in the middle of the country. So people don't have to go from coast to coast. They can come from the coast to the middle now. So that's neat.
I'm looking forward to that for sure.
Yeah, beautiful downtown Chicago. And so be looking for that. I think they're going to be putting out for requests for proposals of people to present. Phenomenal time. It was good to see actually the CISA, which stands for it's catching my name here, State Educational Technology Directors Association, who the executive director for CISA is Julia Fallon. And a lot of people didn't know, but she loves to be a DJ on the side. So she did a little bit of that. She was DJing some things there, but she's phenomenal and really has pulled the group together. And they won an award for being a volunteer group of the year. I believe it was volunteer group of the year. It could have been just a CoSN partnership award, but it was so many times it's the people who are running and heading the state educational technology directors, the people that are running that portion of it for their state that get together in this organization. But it's a partner organization with CoSN. And then closing out CoSN was Richard Collada, who is the executive director of CEO of ISTE, the International Society of Technology and Education, and also ASCD, because they're a brand new partnership together. He talked about beyond the algorithm, and he had it was a panel discussion, again, focused with that theme of AI, EdTech, but it's partnerships with these major organizations. I think it's a really good way to have on-ramps to getting plugged in and building that network of folks that aren't just in your neighborhood or neck of the woods. I was trying to say that at the same time, but all across the country. And I think just like we realize at K-12-6, and I realize again at CoSN, is that many times we're all dealing with the same problems. We're all trying to reinvent the wheel, and maybe we don't have to do that as much because people are already, if we would just share and get along and be willing to learn from each other, which a lot of people are. So these are great on-ramps conference-wise to get in and make that happen. Yeah, so CoSN's going to be in Chicago this next year, so that'll be fun. And make your plans now. They probably have the dates on there. I wish I could share those right now.
It is April 13th through 15th.
April 13th, so that's a little later this year, that time around, 13th through 15th.
Yeah, so I've got my scratch sheet here where I was looking up hotels. Several hotels near the venue are already sold out, so
yeah,
I've got to.
You can come and stay at my house if you want. But anyway, yeah, so it would be good. Get together, maybe bring your wife. We've mentioned this in the past shows. Your wife has the same name as my wife, so that's kind of interesting. But anyway, and you got a chance to meet her at another conference that we were at together. At any rate, so yeah, CoSN's next year, and the one thing that we all did simultaneously at CoSN, and it was their largest, by the way. This year was their largest attended one that they've ever had. I will also brag on Illinois a little bit because our chapter, which I'm a proud board member of, actually won an award from CoSN for being the most. I'd have to look at what it says exactly on the award, but we have the most growth in chapters across the state, and we are over 172 school districts that are members of our state chapter of CoSN, which is IETL, Illinois EdTech Leaders. And that was pretty neat to get that award. And a lot of people were envious of that. I think the year before we won the award, but at that point, the award was the most retained. In other words, the most districts that renewed year after year. So they obviously see some value in it. Yeah. They didn't give that award this year, maybe because we got this other award this year, so we maybe would have won that award as well. Who knows? One award per participant. I don't know.
Yeah, but those are good metrics to be associated with.
Yes, very much, and we provide a lot of value, I think, to our CTOs here in Illinois and around the country. Several of our CTOs did a lot of presentations at CoSN too, so that was neat to see. But one thing that we all did together at CoSN was we got together, they put up a link to a website that maybe I'll share here about that. One of the big things that they do is they advocate on our behalf around the nation for federal programs that help us to do our jobs, which is cybersecurity. And that's one of our jobs, right? One part of it. But they advocate to Congress, who actually signs the checks and puts things out there. And now more than ever, with different uncertainties of how funds are structured, as CoSN says on their page, K-12 cybersecurity threats are rising and we need your voice. Cyber attacks on schools are escalating, yet critical federal support is being cut just when schools need it most. The new administration has eliminated funding for key cybersecurity programs that directly benefit K-12 schools, such as MSISAC. Remind us again what MSISAC stand for?
Oh boy, Multi-State Information Sharing AC.
AC, yeah. There you go. All right. But yes, so that's one of them. Yeah, information sharing services. That's what it says here. CISA's K-12 cybersecurity guidance and the Office of EdTech cybersecurity policy coordination. These cuts have put schools at a greater risk, stripping away the tools and support districts rely on to defend against ransomware and other cyber threats. Cybersecurity is a bipartisan issue, as they emphasize, with real-world consequences for students, families, and school operations. So now is the time to speak up. Join CoSN in urging Congress to restore funding, reinstate staff, and invest in targeted cybersecurity support for K-12 schools. You can send a letter to your member of Congress from your state. So we obviously want to raise that voice and raise that information. I'm going to pull up what that looks like real quick here. I was just reading the letter that's on the right there that talks about K-12 cybersecurity threats. And if you click on that link, so maybe we can make sure that link is available in our podcast. But it's, if you're not sure, in fact, they had a QR code at CoSN that we all scanned really quick. But the website is cosen.quorum.us. That's QUORUM.us. and /campaign, but I don't think you need to know that. As long as you get CoSN on there, you should be able to find it off their website. But really, you just fill out your name and your address and your email, and there is a canned letter that pops up that you can actually see, and if you want, you can edit it to make it more personal from your school district, and then submit it. I actually added a couple of statements that I felt strongly about into the letter. And I sent it off, and next thing you know, a week later, I'm getting letters from my Congress people saying that they appreciate us putting that word out there, that we're advocating for it, and that they will do their best to advocate for what we are looking for. The more Congress hears how important this is, like I said, it's not a bipartisan issue. It's something that we desperately need. And unfortunately, at the time we need it most, corporations need this just as much when they are doing their stuff, when they are trying to keep their intellectual properties safe. And our intellectual property is our students and their student information. And so we need to keep that just as safe, if not more safe. And we need ways to do that. We need funding to be able to do that appropriately because it's just getting tougher out there all the time. Have you already submitted that? Have you done that yourself?
I have, yes. Yeah, so I was just going to offer a big amen to that because we talk in K-12 a lot about how constrained we are when it comes to resources for technology in general, but specifically cybersecurity. And the resources that we use from both CISA and MSISAC, if we were to go out and purchase those services, there's no way. It's too cost prohibitive for us to be able to do that. But at the same time, another part of those organizations is making the connection. So like you mentioned, we've both been to tabletops run by CISA. I receive intelligence sharing reports from MSISAC. I've met people through MSISAC work groups. There aren't a lot of outlets for K-12 cybersecurity, and these are two that are federally funded, available to all schools, and offer top-notch services. Anything we can do to maintain or grow those services, I'm all in favor of.
So in my senator's case, I have 2 senators and a representative. I've received an email already back from my representative and one of my senators, Dick Durbin. But this was the email they actually put in the subject line for you. You don't have to type anything up other than your information about, you saw what I did up here, my first name, last name, my address, and my email. Don't be afraid to use your school district email because I think it's just as important that they understand that you work for a school district. But here it is, the letter. And if I wanted to, I could type right in here and edit it. Actually, hitting a little pencil on the bottom down here would allow me to edit it. But you don't have to. You can hit it, submit it this way. I wanted to personalize it and make sure that they understood that this is real. It's not just a form letter.
Right.
It is just a form letter, but I wanted to make it more personal than just a form letter. Mm-hmm. So either way it works. You're getting the attention. And like I said, I've already received receipt. Not just receipt, but a letter back from my Congress people. So I thought that was just really important, and we can still do it. So I would highly suggest it. Over the weekend, there was a lot of protesting going around the country about things that they don't necessarily agree with. And this is a good protest. Sometimes it's the good fight, if you will, sometimes noticed as. Yeah, I would highly recommend it. I'm going to stop sharing now, but that is something I would urge everybody to do. Let's keep the funding rolling. They're already trying to experiment with the cybersecurity, with E-rate that we have talked about, cybersecurity pilot. And I think from what I understand, that funding may even be still up in the air. They selected all the schools that were going to be getting that, but I don't know that they've gotten any money distributed yet. And so hopefully that this might turn that tide and get the ball rolling for districts that really desperately need some help. And really all districts, I think, need help. So there it is.
Absolutely. Yes.
All right. Did you have this? Could we consider this our parting tip?
Yeah, I think that is a great take-home message for people is just take that opportunity that CoSN has put out there. They've given you a very easy button for being able to contact your Congress members to be able to voice your opinion and put in your 2 cents about funding cyber for K-12.
All right. Sounds good. I think that's it for today. We covered a bunch of things today and caught up with some things. We got some more catching up to do because there's a lot of other things that have been going on too. But thank you all for joining us today, and we appreciate your subscription. Make sure you hit the subscribe button if you haven't already so you get the latest and greatest. When we drop a new episode, you get it before anybody else gets it. All right. Thank you very much, and have a great day, and help your district to become a
Zero
breach
zone.
There it is. All right. Have a good day.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of the Zero Breach Zone podcast. We hope our conversation left you feeling more informed and empowered to protect our K-12 schools from cyber threats.
A big shout out to our sponsor, CyberNut AI, for making this podcast possible. CyberNut is committed to providing security awareness training designed for schools, helping educators and students navigate the digital world with confidence.
If you want to learn more about how CyberNut can help strengthen your school's cybersecurity defenses, head over to their website, cybernut.com, and sign up for their training program. Together, we can create a safer online environment for everyone in our educational communities.
And don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Connect with us on LinkedIn to join the conversation and help us build a strong community around cybersecurity and education.
Join us next time on the Zero Breach Zone for more insightful conversations. Stay vigilant, stay ahead, and let's keep our schools a
Zero
Breach
Zone.